Hello everyone. Today, I'll be going to discuss to you about the propaganda movement and La Solidaridad. In this lesson, you will be going to determine the various works of Rizal as a propagandist, explain the principle of assimilation advocated by the propaganda movement, and assess Rizal's involvement in the propaganda movement. So, dear students, how did the propaganda movement form? Do you know? Come on, let's find out. Between 1872 and 1892, a national consciousness was growing among the Filipino immigrants who had settled Europe. These immigrants, liberals, were exiled in 1872, and the students attending European universities, they were the one who formed the propaganda movement, organized for literary and cultural purposes more than political ends. The propagandists, which include upper-class Filipinos from all the lowland Christian areas, strove to awaken the sleeping intellect of the Spaniards to the needs of our country. Also, it wanted to create a closer and more equal association of the island and the motherland. And now, let's proceed to the propaganda movement goals. So, among their specific goals were the representation of the Philippines in the Cortes or the Spanish Parliament. Second is the secularization of the clergy. Third is the legalization of Spanish and Filipino equality. And fourth is the creation of public school system independent of the friars. Next is the abolition of the polo or the labor service and vandala, which is a forced sale of local products to the government. And the sixth goal is the guarantee of basic freedoms of speech and association, and the last is the equal opportunity for Filipinos and Spanish to enter government service. So, these were the important propagandists in the propaganda movement. First is Jose Rizal. Second is Cristiano Lopez Jaena and Marcelo H. del Pilar. Jose Rizal was a physician, scholar, scientist, and writer. He was the most outstanding propagandist, and his greatest impact in the development of Filipino national consciousness was his publication of his two novels, which are The Noli Me Tangere or Touch Me Not in 1886 and El Filibusterismo or The Reign of Greed in 1891. He also became one of the contributors of La Solidaridad. Next is Cristiano Lopez Jaena. He was a noted orator and pamphleteer, and he also made the Fray Butod or Brother Fatso. Fray Butod is an unflattering portrait of a provincial friar, and in 1889, he established the biweekly newspaper in Barcelona entitled La Solidaridad. La Solidaridad became the principal organ of the propaganda movement, and it has audiences both in Spain and in the Philippines. Its contributors included Dr. Jose Rizal, Dr. Ferdinand Blumentritt, who was an Austrian geographer and ethnologist whom Rizal had met in Germany, and Marcelo H. del Pilar, a reform-minded lawyer. So, this is La Solidaridad and its aims. Our aspirations are modest, very modest. Our program, aside from being simple, is clear. To combat reaction, stop all retrogressive steps, to install and adopt liberal ideas, to defend progress. In a word, to be a propagandist above all of democratic ideas in order to make this supreme in all nations here and across the seas. The aims, therefore, of La Solidaridad are prescribed as to collect, to gather libertarian ideas which are manifested daily in the field of politics, science, art, literature, commerce, agriculture, and industry. We shall also discuss all problems relating to the general interests of the nation and seek solutions to those problems in high-level and democratic manner. With regard to the Philippines, since she needs the most help, not being represented in the courts, we shall pay particular attention to the defense of our democratic rights, the accomplishment of which is our patriotic duty. That nation of 8 million souls must not be exclusive reserve of theocracy and traditionalism. However, La Solidaridad, it went out of business in November 1895. The next propagandist was Marcelo del Pilar. He was a reform-minded lawyer. He was also active in the anti-friar movement in the islands until obliged to flee to Spain in 1888. He also became the editor of La Solidaridad and assumed leadership of the Filipino community in Spain. In 1887, Rizal returned to the Philippines. However, because of the issue regarding Noli Me Tangere, he was advised by the governor to leave. So, he returned to Europe by the way of Japan and North America to complete his second novel. And there, he also had his edition of Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. By the way, Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, or the history of the Philippine island, is stemmed from an ethnological interest in the cultural connections between the people of the pre-Spanish Philippines and those of the larger Malay region. Apil na ana ang modern Malaysia and Indonesia, as well as the closely related political objective of encouraging national pride. Then, in June 1892, he returned to the Philippines because the Dominicans had evicted his father as well as his sisters from the land they leased from the friar's estate at Calamba. So, he also was convinced that the struggle for reform could no longer be conducted effectively from overseas. Then, in July 1892, he established the Liga Filipina, or the Philippine League, which was a truly national and non-violent organization. However, it was dissolved after his arrest and exile to the remote town of Dapitan in northwestern Mindanao. The propaganda movement languished after Rizal's arrest and the collapse of the Liga Filipina. Also, La Solidaridad went out of business in November 1895, and in 1896, Del Pilar and Luis Chena died in Barcelona. There was also an attempt to re-establish the Liga Filipina. However, the national movement split between Ilustrado advocated of reform and peaceful evolution, which is the Compromisarios or the Compromisers, and the plebeian constituency that wanted revolution and national independence, because the Spanish refused to allow genuine reform. So the initiative quickly passed from the former group to the latter. This is the end of lesson 2. Thank you so much for listening and watching this video, and I hope that you learned something. Keep safe, everyone.